I want to introduce Arlene Rodriguez, who is Provost and Academic and Vice President of Academic and Student Affairs and everything else at the college. Most everything, yes. There we go.
Thank you, Tom. I've got the best parts of the college. That's what I always say. I got the teachers, I got the faculty, and I get to say yes and continue to say yes to the wonderful things that the faculty do here, such as yourself, Tom, and with the Writers Series. Welcome, everyone, to Middlesex Community College and our MCC Visiting Writers Series. Again, part of the wonderful part of my job is being able to support faculty and staff as they do these creative, innovative series where they can bring people in and we could share their stories and learn more. As a former English major, although I did say to someone today, you don't really stop being an English major. You still have that love of writing and storytelling, and we'll seek it out everywhere. I do appreciate that Middlesex consistently supports these creative endeavors. Just to let you know, I also bring greetings on behalf of President Sisson, who couldn't be here today. For the record, not an English major. And but I do want to say that the series is co-sponsored by the Creative Writing Program, which Tom so skillfully coordinates, and the Office of Student Engagement. We have a very strong leadership in that office, and I'm proud to have them here at Middlesex. So thank you so much, and Mr. Medina, I am looking forward to hearing what you have to say and hearing about your stories as well. I know that it is Hispanic Heritage Month, and as a Latina, I am always saying it's Hispanic, every month is Hispanic Heritage Month, but it's something always to keep in mind that the only growing population in Middlesex County are Hispanic students. We are an emerging Hispanic institution. So it's even more important to be hearing stories from our Latino, Latinx, Hispanic population. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Provost Rodriguez. And I am Tom Laughlin. Welcome. I'm coordinator of the Creative Writing Program, and as was mentioned, this is co-sponsored by the Creative Writing Program and the Office of Student Engagement. I want to shout out some thank yous to Maria McDuffie Clark of the Office of Student Engagement, Dean of Liberal Arts Matt Hurwitz, who is here, and English Department Chair Jill Keller. Thanks to Jeff Kaplan and his interns for videotaping this for us. It's wonderful. Thanks to Beth Noel, who is Director of Marketing Office and helps get word out about these wonderful events. Today we'll hear Pablo Medina read from his work, followed by a question and answer period. We also have books of his to raffle off and some others that you may want to purchase. I'm excited to welcome Pablo Medina back here at Middlesex. He was here a number of years ago in the Luwawa Poetry Festival and heard him and enjoyed his work so much. Is this cutting out on me? No, okay. Pablo Medina is the author of over 20 published books, including poetry, fiction, memoir, and works in translation. Most recently, the poetry collection, Sea of Broken Mirrors, by Hanging Loose Press in 2024, just came out. And the novel, The Cuban Comedy, came out in 2019. Born in Havana, Cuba, and raised in New York City, he is also the author of the memoir, Exiled Memories, A Cuban Childhood. Also known for his work in translation, he translated The Weight of the Island, Selected Poems of Virgilio Piñera in 2014. Everyone Will Have to Listen, The Writings of Cuban dissident Tania Diaz Castro, co-translated with Carolyn Hospital. Federico García Lorca's Poet in New York, co-translated with poet Mark Statman, that the poet John Ashbery described as, quote, the definitive version of Lorca's masterpiece. Medina's work has appeared in the Boston Review, Triquarterly Poetry Magazine, American Poetry Review, Ploughshares, and The New Yorker. His prose and poetry have been translated into various languages, among them Spanish, French, German, Japanese, and Arabic. He has won numerous honors, awards, and fellowships, including from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Oscar Sintas Foundation, and the Guggenheim Foundation. He earned both a BA and MA from Georgetown University. is Professor Emeritus of Fiction, Translation, and Poetry at Emerson College in Boston, and is on the faculty of the Warren Wilson College MFA program for writers. Currently, he splits his time between Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Williamsville, Vermont. Of Pablo Medina's new book, Sea of Broken Mirrors, John Scoyles, the writer and poetry editor of Ploughshares Literary Journal, has said, quote, "The poems in Sea of Broken Mirrors are equally visceral, physical, and spiritual. In this world, we find love of the rain, umbrellas, and those who walk beneath them, which is every one of us. But unlike most of us, Pablo Medina sees worlds beyond worlds. People transform into flora and fauna. God is a gentleman in tweeds, and a lamp leads to the moon, which leads to the infinity. The marvel of this work is that poems so rife with flesh and blood can also joyfully embrace the soul. Pablo Medina is unsurpassed as a poet of faith, imagination, and above all, compassion." End quote. Please help me welcome Pablo Medina.
Thank you, Tom, and the Creative Writing Program for having me here, as well as Middlesex Community College. I had a very nice gathering with the Willie Ramirez. Is it a poetry class? Is it a
Creative writing.
Creative writing, yeah. And so it's my pleasure to continue with this exchange. And I do consider it an exchange, and I hope you have some questions after my actual reading. I've been traveling around, doing a little bit of traveling, promoting this book, Sea of Broken Mirrors, which is a collection of poems written in the last 5 years or so. Usually I take about 10 years, but this was written more quickly than that, probably because of the pandemic. All of a sudden, as I'm sure you're all aware, we had a lot of time in our hands, and so I spent it writing poetry. As I said, I was doing a lot of traveling and just came back from New York. I read at a bar where they've had, it's called KGB, as in the old Soviet Secret Service. They've been having a reading there, a reading series for 27 years. And as we were walking, my wife and I were walking up the steps to the bar, a group of people were behind us, led by one fellow, and he asked, I turned around and he asked if that was a KGB bar. And I said, "Yes, are you coming to the reading?" Thinking, oh my God, we're gonna have a good audience. But no, he said, "No, we're going drinking." I said, "Oh, okay." But could you? He said, "Then could you give us a little taste of what you're going to do?" And the only thing that came into my mind was a poem that I memorized in high school. In high school, we were supposed to memorize a poem a week. That was one of the requirements. And this came out. It's called "Upon Julia's Clothes." It's by Robert Herrick, a 17th century cavalier poet, English cavalier poet. Upon Julia's clothes. When as in silks my Julia goes, then methinks how sweetly flows the liquefaction of her clothes. Next, when I cast mine eyes and see that vibration each way free, oh, how that glittering taketh me. And the guy looked at me and he said, you killed it, man, you killed it. I said, "Are you coming?" He said, "No." Okay. The only thing, then of course I had to have the last word. I said, "You never know when you listen to a poem that might change your life." But they didn't go to the reading. Let me begin with one of my poems that is not in the book, but it's a poem that I've kind of grown fond of. I wrote it this year. It's a fresh poem. For me, that's a fresh poem. After a visit to the dentist. It's called My Teeth in the New Year. This is in January. My Teeth in the New Year. My teeth were hurting, by the way. No dentist can tell me my teeth are fine. They hurt. They grate and grind, trying to pulverize time. My jaw, stubborn mule, or kicked by one, refused at entry. Unswallowed then, time withdrew. My jaw relaxed, but in it remained a scant memory of bone and sinew, what a beginning is, and how the end comes slow or sudden, like a cat. So that's my entry into 2024. Welcome, hi. That's another poem that's not in the book, but it's an older poem called American Food. I came from Cuba at the age of 12, my family, and I grew up in the Bronx. And I learned for the first time what American food was all about. It was there. What can I say? There's a reference here that I think I should explain. It's Spite and Dival, which is a section of the Bronx just north of Manhattan, just north of the Harlem River.
Excuse me, actually, it turns towards you.
Oh, good, because I feel like I'm coming in and out of. Anyway, here it is. It means the devil's spite and dival in Dutch. You know, New York was a Dutch colony for a while before the English took it over. American food. Once, when I lived in the Bronx, I saw a yellow butterfly float over the train tracks by the Hudson's spiky shore. I went after it, jumping carefully over the third rail all the way to the Harlem River, where the butterfly disappeared into Manhattan. It took me an hour to get home. "You want a tuna fish sandwich?" the old lady who lived down the hall asked. And I said yes. Canned tuna I loved, and had plenty over the years, as well as Chef Boyardee ravioli. Now, I am without tuna fish or Boyardee or bologna on white bread with mayo, another delicacy of my youth. "I'm dying," I told that sweet lady in a dream. "What else is new?" she said, and offered a chopped liver sandwich. I bit into it and gagged. I'd never tasted the paste of inner organs. Under the moon, I went down to the street and walked past Spite and Dival and the Bronx, across the river to New Jersey, where I heard a wailing, tender voice spitting out grape after grape of purple angst. American food makes sense if sense is what you look for and you're hungry from your travel past the devil's spite and the tuna fish, the chopped liver, and the butterfly. I'm going to actually dare to read a longish poem, a couple of pages. Book is called Sea of Broken Mirrors, and it's all about, in many ways, about looking at yourself and seeing what you, discovering what you see in a mirror. I keep punning with that sea of broken mirrors, unintentionally, by the way. Canticle of the Mirror. It isn't in the mirror of today I see myself, or yesterday, or back when I lived behind the funeral home and spied the corpses brought in body bags late at night, or further back when the house cat ate her kittens and the hurricane blew away the mango tree. It's in the space between time and memory, between the death knell and the river's armature cold shadow, tempering the sun and darkening the water. My mother once told me she saw God walking around the yard, green and glum like a three-toed sloth. Then she sang, El negrito está en la tumba y nadie lo va a buscar. Ne, na, na, ne, ne, na, 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 ne, ne, na, 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 na. A song about a black boy in the grave, not my kind of doom. No one will notice or turn his way, no one torn from her sleep to seek him out. Old love, old bones, the winding, mossy way to the end of self. Have you ever had your fate withheld, and it's the wind tapping your shoulder, telling you it's time? Mirrors speak to one another and multiply. I see myself repeated, present to past, to moon's milk dripping out of the sky. Then the murmur of what speaks without knowing, then the fog spreading over the pines as spring swallows ambition, and the first insects awaken. River high after last night's rain, sooner than I want the day will end, and dream be real, and real stamp its feet and clamor for the dawn and the thrush's song. Luck turn back at the gate, sweet long thing, sweet long running thing. I wish I knew how love strikes like the brain's refrain. River high after last night's rain. The art of a blind man looking at the sky, the art of the equinox of your voice, the art of smiling at the face of death, the art of digging through the dust and clay, the art of my people, the trees, the art of the stones like the eggs of time, the art of the hills reprise, the art of knowing when to close your eyes. Thank you. Canticle of the House. I live in a house in the woods, a beautiful house of many rooms, which isn't mine. My father never lived here, or my mother, or my sister, or my son. In these parts, my name is less than nothing, a wisp of wind, not even a thought someone had or didn't. Nearby is a river full of stones. Only when it floods is it a river of water and rapids and foam. Once it overflowed and came in the house. The river never belonged to anyone, though it might have wanted to if it had a brain, and with the brain longing, and with longing, regret. As now it has stones and sometimes a lot of water flooding the yard and the basement where I have photos, mostly black and white, of my father and mother and sister and son who have never lived here, unlike me who has. The river is not my river, and the house is not my house. Many of these poems are inspired by my recent move to Vermont and what I have found there, including a lot of trees. But it's nice, it's beautiful. A lot of water too, a lot of rivers. But this poem is really a memory poem about my uncle Carlos in Miami. called Canticle of Uncle Carlos, who sat with a quart bottle of cheap beer under the mango tree after laying cinder blocks in the Miami heat all day and proclaimed to his cousin Paco, "I feel like a king." This poem is for him who always felt that way, even when he was dying of throat cancer and could barely speak through the tumor that was choking him. Still, he told dirty jokes to fellow patients in the common room and drank a beer I sneaked in past the nurse's station. My father called me with the news, almost crying. His brother had died, and now the tree was dying too. A mere coincidence, no doubt. No doubt we die miserably and alone in a nursing room with the radio playing a bolero of lost love the nurses like. Uncle Carlos never took things seriously, not money or power, not prestige or good looks or bad boleros. Viva la muerte, he said. All he ever needed was a drink after a hard work day, the sun shining through the branches, and his cousin Paco, now dead as well, who marveled at the king on his throne under the mango tree. The problem with people clapping, I appreciate it, after every poem, is that they'll call a poem when people don't clap. And I think they should, and I feel awful. Recollection of the rain in Miami. For the memory of my mother. In the afternoon came rain, in streams and spits and pings, its constant chatter trying to be song, broken by the swish of cars outside the house. I wanted to bring the past to her in its glory and confusion, nature's cleansing tool against the broken motor of life. I wanted to speak to the stars who don't know the meaning of grief. My writing not fast enough, every letter like a heavy drop that fell before the end and kissed her face and tasted the amber surface of her eyes. I warn you. I should warn myself. We were talking in the class before that, sometimes the simplest poems have the greatest sort of meaning, the most profound sort of revelation coming out of them. We were talking about William Carlos Williams and his Imagist period, and those very simple poems he wrote, which were all image and devoid of all modification and rhyme and all those things we naturally associate with poetry. It's like the red wheelbarrow. People say, "Oh, what does that mean?" It's just language. If I remember correctly, it goes like this: the red wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Of course, what does that mean? And it really doesn't mean anything but itself. But there's a certain power in that simplicity, a certain way that it allows you to approach the poem. I tried to work that way in this little poem called Cassie in the Garden. Cassie's in the garden, planting the flowers that bless us. Unaware, she is the flower with a prickly stem that draws blood. Blood, I said. Look at those petals, red and succulent. Lucifer time, Lucifer and God dancing a sardana, sweating out the many poisons of life. When she's done, she comes back in and drinks a glass of water. She's taking a shower now. I asked Willie if I should read some, if I could read some poems in Spanish, since I do write a few. He said, just for the rhythm, and I think that's fair enough, just for the rhythm. I'm not going to attempt to translate them into English. I don't like to translate my English poetry, my Spanish poetry into English, or vice versa for that matter. El tiempo en la semilla. Luego del río, luego del largo camino, cae la tarde como cae la nieve y cubre la montaña. Cae la tregua sobre los días. Cae, ya lo sé, el tiempo en la semilla. La moneda. El pasado es historia, el futuro es sueño. Solo el presente. Solo el presente. Y tú, andando tras los hombres salvajes, las mujeres de mal diente, lo fracturado y lo carnal, son dos caras de una moneda. El pensamiento es un perdido en los caminos del misterio. Misterio, tan cerca del olvido. Anyway, just to give you a sense of what appears in Spanish when I try it. This is a poem that originally titled La Caña de Pescar Poemas, but that wasn't working out too well. It literally means that the pole for fishing poles. Doesn't quite translate into English very well. So I retitled it Climate Change Canticle. The sea means much in my poems. So do rivers and the ripples caused by fish swimming against the current. Here in Vermont, the first snow has come and the birds have already flown south. Not long ago, the skies of the Everglades darkened with flocks, and I saw on electric lines hundreds of kingfishers as I drove the Tamiami Trail. Last winter, I counted 5, which has nothing to do with poetry and a lot to do with climate change. Daily now, I fish, facing bare trees and sharp wind. 1 or 2 poems might come, or ideas for poems, or nothing at all. Then I pack on my pole to try another spot and think, I'll write prose, which is like trying to land the big redeeming whale. Soon, this sun won't be so weak, and the birds that survive will be around all year. Snow, a primal memory, and the Everglades, a watery dream I'll write about instead of fish. Here's a religious poem. Which God is God. John Calvin's Shark. I called originally Salvation Beach. That kind of spoils the last line. So, John Calvin's Shark. John Calvin is a theologian, Swiss theologian. God exists, and he's a gentleman in tweeds looking down his nose at me. As if I were, sorry, let me begin again. God exists, and he's a gentleman in tweeds looking down his nose at me as if I were a creature made of oil and stink. God exists, and he's a shark bearing his teeth. rough hide, big jaw, about to pounce while I swim across the surface of his eye. He is a vulture, he is a maiden, a voyage to the country of glee. God preens himself, then turns around and asks what I've done, where I've been. No one ever thanks him, but in his dream I am awake, and in my dream he bites and chews an arm, a leg, my heart, that comes ashore to rest on Salivation Beach. See what I mean when you don't no, you don't have to. You don't have to. I want to read another longer poem, but I'll desist from that and not drive you crazy. Here's one that I sort of wrote one New Year. I like to read. A lot of poems come around that time of year. Oh, I wonder why. Oh, Melancholy Baby. Every New Year's is the same. I build things up, I eat bad food, I drink champagne, which I don't like, and then I kiss and kiss and wish and nothing comes. Next day, I rummage through the house and find the manifest of the ship of my destiny. All the passengers are gone or about to go. If I write, the words are clumsy before the desert sea ahead. If I read, I'm soon bored and fall asleep. I wish I had a pet I could feed or stroke, but my last pet died upside down of neglect. So have all the plants I've ever owned. I live with silverfish who eat my books. Plenty of food here till I die, probably on the couch, waiting while my friends outside bang the door and sing Melancholy Baby. Dance away the stars. Let's do one more. Couple more, maybe two more. New Pastures. Again, a scene in Vermont. Spring snow falling, I am walking by the river to dispense with city air stuck to my clothes, trapped in my hair. Some vague need to embrace whatever love has left in me. Spring snow falling and the field on the far shore glows like the blue sheets on which you wrote of moves to new pasture. On that field, birds now, or the memory of birds, black and scattered. I think I should run back to where I found you, an island that insists, as if insistence were the mirror of existence. Water rises every spring as the snow melts me closer to our days together. Here, another COVID poem. In Vermont. We spent most of the pandemic. The gift. I'll end with this. The gift. I am a child of the sea, but I've always lived by rivers. They're never the same. When the moon is full, I stop and wonder. When winter comes, I crawl in my cave. I used to love the city, its buildings and clamor. Now I'd rather walk in the woods and bathe in the breath of trees. The watch on my wrist reminds me I will end where I began. Time is a gift unearned. I have a dog named Diego who hates when I leave the house, afraid I'll never return. There is no comforting him. Just now, he shook off a thought he didn't like. He learned that trick from me. My wife sings in the morning and tries to get me to dance. Last winter, we ran naked through the falling snow. I feel blessed there are things I know, and many more I don't. My dearest friends live far away. I long for them as I long for comfortable clothes. My son has become a man. He looks like my father and acts like me sometimes. The day will come when sleep is a seed, and the seed will grow in ways I do not understand. Thank you. I don't know if you have any questions. Please. Happy to answer or try. Yes.
I was wondering well, thank you for the reading.
Thank you. Thank you.
I was wondering what your relationship is like to translating, say, Lorca, and versus translating your own work, or how you, as a translator, engage with other work differently than, say, your own from Spanish to English, English to Spanish, rather.
I don't like to translate my own work, first of all. I try to avoid that as much as possible, because I work very closely in English with the sound of the language. And sound is, or the music of the language, is almost impossible to translate. In fact, it's impossible from one language to another, especially from a Romance language, which Spanish is, into a Germanic language, which German essentially, English essentially is. So I don't like to do it. I have done it, but I'm reluctant to do it. I'd rather get somebody else to do it for me. As far as my relationship with translation, well, because I know both languages, Spanish and English, it's a constant for me. I like doing it. I do it when I have nothing to write in English. Okay, so then I've always got translation to rely on. There's always something that I can translate. It's a beneficial thing for me. It's very difficult sometimes, and sometimes impossible. And I'll give you an example. I've tried many times to translate the Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges, but his language is so pure and so accessible in Spanish, and so dense and inaccessible in English that I've pretty much thrown up my hands and would rather do somebody else. I don't know if that answers the question. But
what did you like translating, or what was your relationship like to translating Lorca?
Well, two things. I've been hearing Lorca, the name García Lorca, Federico García Lorca, since I was a kid, and listening to his poetry read in Spanish by my family, and particularly my uncle Carlos, the same Carlos who sat under the mango tree and drank a beer. That guy knew poetry like you wouldn't believe. He was just, he would come out with stuff all the time. So I'd heard his poetry from the time I was a child, and so I was familiar with Lorca, and in particular we recite that Llanto por la muerte de Ignacio Sánchez Mejías at 5 in the afternoon, where it begins with that repetition, and it's about the death, lament for the death of a bullfighter is often translated as such, the death of a bullfighter in the ring, who was his friend. It's a longer poem, but he would recite that, and I would just kind of listen and become very intrigued by his sounds and his language. There was another element too, in translating that Poet in New York, which is what Mark Statman and I did. We were both eyewitnesses to the destruction of the World Trade Center, 9/11, 2001. And we were both separately trying to discover a writer who might have captured that sense of despair, desperation, darkness, unknowingness that we felt in the aftermath of 9/11. Separately, again, this is the interesting part about it. We read many poets, writers, novelists, and the one that we both decided did it best is García Lorca. In Poeta en Nueva York. And it's a book he wrote based on his stay in New York for 9 months in 1929, 1930. In the immediate aftermath, in fact, he was in New York during the crash of the stock market in 1929. So he witnessed that. He witnessed directly or indirectly, the despair of people who threw themselves off buildings and so on because they had lost everything and so on. So that book, we felt that the Poet in New York captured the complexity of New York City, its darkness, its inferno-like atmosphere in the aftermath of a major social and cultural and political crisis. And so those two things came together. And we started translating. It took us 3 years, and we meet every week. We each translated every poem separately. We would meet every week and compare the poems and the translations. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the story behind Poet in New York and our efforts in doing that.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you, first of all.
Thank you.
What a wonderful way to spend a Wednesday afternoon.
Isn't it?
It is. Much different than the morning. I'm going to share something very brief that's personal, and I have a question, and I don't want to make this all about Lorca.
Yeah, no, but by all means, I could spend days talking about it.
He's one of my favorite poets, and I actually had the opportunity to bring some groups of students to Granada, Spain, where he's from, and we went to the park named after him and visited his summer home, and so I'm having a lot of intense just emotions right now in response to everything that you're saying, because I remember standing in that park. Now, we read some of his poetry in Spanish, but sitting there with some students and reading some of his poetry together in the park named after him outside of his summer home, where you speak about him is just very resonating to me. And anyway, so I just wanted to share that. But also, I was curious to actually make this about you again and ask you a question.
I'd rather talk about Lorca, but go ahead.
Well, so I'm curious, on this theme of translation, how do you find that your work as a translator influences what you bring to your work as a poet, and how those things interact?
Oh, all the time. I mean, you can't build a firewall between translation and my own poetry. In fact, I welcome the influence, the cross influence that occurs. It doesn't occur immediately. When I'm translating, and when I'm writing my own poems, I'm writing my own poems. But then I look back and I see, oh my God, this sounds like Lorca, or it sounds like Virgilio Piñera, or it sounds like anyone else that I might have translated or attempted to translate at some time in the past. There's another type of translation that I practice, which is not literal. It's an adaptation of a piece in the original. And I do that every once in a while, so that the poem, in a strange way, in a subterranean or subcutaneous way, becomes my own. And though there are echoes that occur from one to the other, it's still my own poem, and that's a very satisfying thing that I do in translation. So there's ways in which these writers, these poems, the work affects mine, and I think makes it deeper, makes it less ego-centered. And translation is essentially a selfless practice, because you really have to put yourself aside and look at what you're reading and how to render it in English without any attempt at interpreting it or changing it, just to satisfy yourself. So, thank you for that question. Yes?
I just wanted to say that your poetry is very beautiful, and I love the way you,
Thank you.
Use your words to have like, how do I put it, like a really great like visual, like I can actually like see what's happening. But you know, I'm also like a poet myself, and I was just wondering, like, where do you find your inspiration for writing like your poetry? Like, what's something that really like gets you like in the motions of like writing? Because sometimes I struggle with like, I want to write but I can't get it down. Like, what's your like what's something that really inspires you is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Oh, well, other poets inspire me. Seeing through a window that may not appear to be much, maybe a smokestack, or a tree, or a duck, or a wheelbarrow, as happened with William Carlos Williams, will be the source of a thought or an emotion or an idea. I don't know where that leads. It could lead nowhere. But I still do not try and judge myself ahead of time and say, oh no, this is no good. Because you never know. It might be once you're done with it, but it may not be. It may lead to a surprising poem or story or thought. So one of the things that I think is important to do is put that judgmental self aside. You can judge other things, but not your work, not where you're sitting down to write. And you know, if you can't have a brilliant thought at first, believe me, brilliant thoughts don't come very often. They're rare, and the older you get, the rarer they are. So it's a matter of just sitting down and doing it. But in that process, something exciting may come that you don't know about, you didn't know about when you first started.
You know, I'll definitely take that into consideration. It's a very good point, is to not judge yourself too harshly and just kind of like, you know, cast that aside.
Yeah.
And I like your points of like, sometimes it's not even anything super technical, it's just like you said, like looking out a window or like, you know, like just simple scenery, like even just like people watching. And I do that at times, but it's good to have like that reassurance from like other people who are great poets.
And again, you know, sometimes it may not be nothing comes. So read a poem by somebody else and see what happens. And don't put your expectations up here when your mood is down here.
Yeah, it's very true.
You know? And you never know what might come. Here's another William Carlos Williams poem that came up in the class before. Well, this is just to say. This is just to say, I've eaten the plums which were in the icebox and that you were probably saving for breakfast. They were sweet. No, they were, forgive me, they were so sweet and so cold. It's just, all it is, it's a note written and pasted on a refrigerator. And yet there's a sense of immediacy, there's a sense of presence. I can just taste those plums, those delicious plums. So again, you know, next, maybe you should open the refrigerator, see if there are plums in there.
Yeah, it's a very good idea. I'll take that into consideration. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Questions?
Hi, when you came here at 12 to the U.S. and Cuba, did you experience a lot of culture shock that might have been either shocking or amusing, and is any of that in your work?
It is my work, and the answer is yes. And it was, I was a 12-year-old kid who was coming to the greatest city in the world. And it was a marvelous experience. Only in retrospect, after I grew up, did I realize the sense of the pathos of it, the struggle that my sister and I went through in trying to adapt to this country. But at the time, it was fantastic. It was like, I'd seen pictures of New York, I've seen it in movies and so on, and to be there, to be along those avenues and those skyscrapers, and taking a subway,
Okay, yeah. it's like-
eating a dirty water dog. Do you know what a dirty water dog is? It was just, I discovered pizza, which I loved. So, there was plenty of exciting things, but of course it was traumatic. Not the least of which, I already knew English because I'd gone to a school that taught English as a core subject. But hearing that language in the streets of New York made a great deal of difference. It was hard. And I was, of course, my mother's translator. Everywhere I went with her, I had to translate. And that was more traumatic than you think, because they were immediately set you up as a foreigner, as an other. And it was embarrassing for me, and frustrating for her.
Yeah, we just read a poem in the textbook about that. Forgive me, I don't remember the title of it, but it moved me about how the first generation is getting taught by where they move to because their parents don't and won't learn the language, and so they're caught in this sort of situation where they feel like they don't have a first language, and oftentimes they go to silence as their first language, and
Yeah.
it talks about the many cadences of silence. And do you feel like that was that kind of position?
To some degree, yeah. Of course, home became this place of safety, of comfort, and of ease because we could revert back to our language, to the mother tongue, and so it was. I was always eager to get home, always eager, because I just didn't have to translate both in my mind and to my mother.
Thank you.
There's a line, or you referred to going to Vermont, moving there, and homes you found, and partly a question about whether that initial Cuba, New York experience, cross-cultural, how that influenced your writing. Did it influence you to become a writer, and how those different moves over the years influence your writing, and how you re-see the past, or through the lens of
Yeah, they did in many ways, ways that I'm even just now beginning to unravel and understand. But my initial move to New York was the biggest one, the most both the most exciting one and the most traumatic one. Other moves depended more on my getting a teaching job. I got a job. I got a job in Las Vegas, so I went to Las Vegas, and boy, was that a trauma. But I survived there as best I could, and after 3 years, I needed to be back east. Much as I liked the landscape there, and it's striking, it's quite dramatic. I needed to be back east, and that's how I came to Boston. That's how I wound up in Boston, a place that is probably the most foreign to me, because when I was in New York is they call it a melting pot, but Daniel P. Moynihan wrote a book called Beyond the Melting Pot, which is, it's not really a melting pot. There are all these groups that survive there and interact, and it's very rich that way. The curious thing happened that I never really thought much about being Cuban because I was in Cuba. You didn't need to define yourself as anything like that. But when I got to New York, all of a sudden, I'm surrounded by Irish, I'm surrounded by Italians, I'm surrounded by Dominicans, I'm surrounded by Puerto Ricans, and all of a sudden, what am I? Well, I come from the island of Cuba, so I guess I'm Cuban. I started, it was both creating a separation, but also helping to define myself in relation to all these other groups. It's an interesting thing.
I'm looking at time, and one thing, our students are transferring beyond Middlesex.
Sure.
And I wonder, having taught for many years, you're Professor Emeritus at Emerson, whether you talk a little bit about writing programs there, and also you do teach in the MFA program at Warren Wilson.
Right.
I wonder if students may be interested in hearing a little bit about.
Yeah. Briefly, yes, I taught I've taught at various programs throughout the country over the years. Emerson's has a very traditional writing program in the sense that it's most people do it in 3 years. Taking courses every semester you take a course in a literature course or a free elective. You have to have a number of credits in literature, and you also take a workshop in your chosen genre, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, poetry. Now there's popular fiction. I think that's it. And so you can, and then you take those. There's a thesis you have to write, whether it's a collection of stories or a collection of poems. Novel in progress, etc. And then this is defended. By defend, I mean you come before a committee and you talk about the work after working with a supervisor for a year. I'm not sure about the number of credits right now because they've been modifying the program, but essentially that's what it is. You're always engaged in a workshop of your genre-specific workshop and a literature course. There's also a translation component that I started, where you take a course in translation as a genre, whether it be translating actual works into English or a course called Translating Cultures, where you talk about how culture influences different literatures. It's more like a comparative literature course than anything. The undergraduate, you have a creative writing major that you can pursue. I think the number of credits is 120, but if you, let's say, like many of you would transfer into the program, you already bring a number of credits with you, general education and so on. So all you have to do is focus on your major. There are ways in which you can link both your creative writing major with visual media arts. So you can actually do a screenwriting workshop of one semester. Since it's such a big program at Emerson, you have an opportunity as well to go to the Netherlands for a semester and teach at a center there, as well as LA. There's a center in LA where you can actually go for a semester. Those are traditional at Emerson. There's also a publishing program. If you're interested in becoming an editor or even an agent, there is a 2-year program which leads to an MA, and many of those folks go on to work in magazines or in publishing houses throughout the country. So that's also an open possibility. I also, as Tom said, teach in occasionally in a low residency program. The difference there is that you're on campus only 10 days per semester. The rest of the time you work one-on-one with a supervisor who is assigned during the residency. at the beginning of each semester. And after 2 years, it's a very intense, demanding program, but after 2 years after, and a thesis, you do receive an MFA. It's a great program. I enjoy doing it when I have the time. And it's a great way to really focus on your writing, especially if you have a life outside the academy, as many of the people do. If you have a profession or you have family and so on, this allows you to do both. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Well, I want to get to raffle some books off, but let's hear it for Pablo Medina. We have some books for students. Any students who have not put a raffle in the box, please do that. Anybody throw your name? Not? Students coming in, maybe do that quickly. Throw your name. Great, another thing coming in. Awesome, good. Any others that haven't made it to the box?
I'm supposed to pick the
Yeah, I'll have you.
the winning entries, right?
Yep.
I can show. Yeah. Bring your flies.
Huh?
There we go. Great. So, how about over here? We'll have it. All right, put it up here. Spin the box. Choose some names.
Three, up to three?
Yes, and, oh, the books are up here.
All right, Xavier Rivera.
There you go. Open that and we'll sign it later.
Yeah, I'll sign it for you. Xavier Rivera. Amber Dubois, is it? Dubois.
Some questions. In your class. No. Yeah.
And Chandrash Patel. Yeah.
And
If you want.
And those who brought books, Pablo would be happy to sign for you. If you're interested in another book, please come up afterwards. I want to just let you know that they're coming up. There are some events, and before we give one last thanks and go have some refreshments, just want to let people know that there's a open poetry and fiction reading and contest, Slam Your Vote in Bedford on October 22nd. $50 prize for the winners, and people will vote for the best writer that day. There's also one here in November 6th, the day after the election, and that will be open poetry and fiction reading. So that is in the Federal Building, the assembly room there. Put that on the calendar. And our next MCC Visiting Writer Series reading is Kristen Hill in Bedford on November 19th. And then we have a special MCC night at the Untitled on the 20th at the Coffee and Cotton Cafe. And that will be a night to celebrate voices of Middlesex and have a night out for us. There's a website, Middlesex Creative Writing at MCC website, and our readings and events are listed there. There's a QR code outside on the table you can scan, and there's an archive I just wanted to point out of recorded past readings and events. This will be there as well. And we also have a literary magazine at the college, Dead River Review, that's linked off of that as well, deadriverreview.com, where students and faculty and staff and alumni's work can be found, so enjoy that. Submissions next semester for that. So do take a look and bookmark that website for other events, and hope to see you at some other events. Let's give one more warm welcome and thank you to Pablo for his great reading. Enjoy refreshments, chat individually with Pablo Medina. Thanks again for coming.